Through more than 2 decades at Kenner and Hasbro, Aaron built worlds, told stories, and designed toys for some of pop culture's biggest names, including Transformers, Batman, Star Wars, and more. Join him as he explores the archives and tells you the stories of the creative process behind your favorite toys. This is the Toy Armada with your host, Aaron Archer.
So we are back again for another Toy Armada with Aaron Archer, and today is going to be a special one because we are just weeks away from the Transformers Rise of the Beasts movie, and we figured we'd be doing a special segment today. We're going to be doing multiple of these in the future, but we're going to kind of go backwards a little bit, start from the end, and then move to the beginning because of the man today we're talking about and the individual involved with our beautiful podcast here today. First of all, how you doing, Aaron?
I'm good.
Excellent, excellent. So we're going to be talking Beast Wars today, and more specifically, the stuff that Aaron was involved with during Beast Wars. And there's a lot of really good stuff here to talk about. We're going to cover other Beast Wars stuff in the future, but today we're just going to cover Aaron's history with the brand, and there's a lot of important stuff here because this is really your first time working with Transformers. Starts with Beast Wars. Is this correct?
Yeah, my first contact at all with it, yes.
So what we'll start with first of all is, and we've talked about this before, but I mean the podcast is now a couple years old, so we always have new listeners. But what was your first touch with anything Transformers to begin with?
So, like my childhood, or
yeah, like the first time you even knew this brand even existed.
Yeah. So I was definitely a kid that I was 10 years old when Transformers hit, maybe 11. So I remember it well. It was cool. It came from Japan. It was cooler than GoBots. I was a big G.I. Joe kid, so I was definitely in the Hasbro family of products. So I had a lot of the classic G1 characters: Starscream, Optimus, Bumblebee, Ironhide. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So when we fast forward now quite a bit, we're going to be getting into Beast Wars debuts in 1995. Where are you in your toy career, if you will? Where are you at this point?
I'm at Kenner. I started in January of 95 at Kenner.
And what were you working on at that time at Kenner?
So I was on the Batman team, and at that time, that is all that team did was Batman-related product until.
So all the little sublines and everything too.
Yeah. Movies, comic-related, all animated-related. Yep. So
how did you essentially get pulled onto the Beast Wars Transformer team, which I'm going to assume at this point was still, because obviously from us as a toy buyer perspective, we're seeing that transition from Kenner to Hasbro on the packaging. But when did you get pulled onto the Beast Wars team, and was it Kenner at the time or was it Hasbro at the time?
That's a good question. I think it did say Kenner for a second. That part I don't recall. They had different.
Yeah, that's a tough one because again, like we have product in '98 that says Hasbro on it, but we know from behind the scenes that transition was a little slower from the back end. So
from a big perspective, just how that overall worked, Hasbro bought Kenner back in 93, I believe, 94. And it was slowly transitioned to the Hasbro icon marks over the years. Star Wars got transitioned when Episode 1 came out, things like that. So it wasn't a hard and fast thing. Basically, I always worked for Hasbro. It just under the Kenner brand name for a little while until they kind of slowly expunged that Kenner as a working company name. So Transformers was in Rhode Island at the Hasbro office. And my first contact with it in relation to my Kenner career was when they said, we are going to bring a couple of people from the Rhode Island office to Cincinnati with Beast Wars Transformers, and they are going to be part of the Batman/Transformers team.
So there was a lot of Batman people that were working now with Beast Wars, which they weren't working with Beast Wars before.
Well, that was our fear. We were very confused. We obviously, Batman was the biggest boys brand that Hasbro had. So we had a full complement of product and a full staff. And the type of toys we made were action feature, 5-point articulation, kind of spring-loaded products. So there was a immediate fear, confusion, worry, like, we don't know how to design Transformers. Like, that seems very specialized and complex, and like we just didn't know what was going to ultimately be expected or not. In the end, the two gentlemen that came from Rhode Island, they had this communication with Takara. We didn't understand how it worked at all at Kenner. And we're quickly relieved of any notion that we would have to be designing complex, mechanized, transforming product in the Cincinnati office. So my first contact was like, oh, that stuff's coming, and kind of worry and confusion. And then we met the two guys. We had a good weekend. They were eager to stay with the brand if they wanted to move, and ultimately they did. And that's when it transitioned to Cincinnati officially. And I think they had a lot of the first wave and a half done. A lot of it was designed in Rhode Island before it even got to Cincinnati.
And we're talking the original Beast Wars Wave 1.
Yeah. I'm going to pull out a book and make some noise. I apologize.
No problem.
The first stuff that would have been started to be designed in Cincinnati would have been things like Tigertron, Silverbolt, Air Razor, I think.
Okay, so we're going into that, like...
Yeah, Depth Charge,
later 96, certainly. 97, yeah.
Yeah, Depth Charge and the Crab were definitely Cincinnati creations. So, yeah, that's kind of where they were.
Okay.
The bat and the alligator were the only samples we had at the time. When they came, they only had the bat and the alligator 2-pack to show what the Beast Wars was even going to be.
So those are like some of the very first items created, you'd have to say.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so Bat, Primal, and Croc Megatron, some of the first items. Cool.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to revisit the origins of Beast Wars in the future, because that's a whole other conversation that's going to be interesting to dive into. So when did you really get pulled into the brand? Like where were you just before you went to Beast Wars Transformers? I guess Batman?
So I was on Batman, and I don't think of it as a switch over. Think of it just added projects within another brand. So I was always doing Batman product. I was probably knee deep in Total Justice and or the development of Night Force Ninjas, and of course everybody was always working on movie products, so we were probably doing Batman and Robin development in there as well.
Okay.
So what I was a illustrator, creator. I could come up with characters. I was willing to draw characters in a lot of different ways, so I didn't have a set way to draw Batman or anything. So the first designer that came over from Rhode Island, Chris Gross, he left at some point a couple years in, and then George Bosnos took over. And I think George Bosnos showed up at some early BotCons in Fort Wayne. He was really into the techniques of manufacturing, whether that was VM or pearlescent in the pigment in the plastic. But he didn't really want to sit around and draw Transformers. So he approached me to draw what became Transmetal 2 designs to see, they had already done Transmetals. They had done, I think, Fusors at that point.
Fusors, yep. Same time, yep.
And so we needed the next thing, and I came up with that next thing. So I drew Dinobot, Cheetor, Scarem, a little bit of Optimus Minor, and the Dragon Megatron. I did not do Tigerhawk. And then a guy named Tim Bradley came in and kind of finished those up and colored those items. Because I just drew drawings. Those weren't my projects to carry through or make sure the model looked like my drawings. I literally drew some stuff. It got thrown to Takara to make those products. So when I say my first Transformer was like the Red Dragon and the Transmetals 2s, those are my first touches with Transformers. But again, they weren't my toys to develop and finish off. So I never got samples of them in real time. I didn't sign off on the green tags or any of that. I was just responsible for some visual direction.
So you were brought on to this brand. So you mentioned quite a few that you did here. So we'll kind of maybe just go over them just very quickly. So we'll start first with let's say the basic class 1999 Optimus Minor. So what was your direction, if you will, or what was your thinking about when designing this character? Or drawing him up, any?
Yeah, I think we just needed a little. We liked the idea of Optimus, and so we just went with a monkey.
Was it
instead of the big ape?
Was it a need to make a Optimus at a smaller price point?
I don't think we had that concept at that time. I just think we wanted to make sure we had another primate in there.
Oh, okay.
Because it worked well and looked a little different.
Because it's just up to that point, historically, Optimus Prime or Optimus characters have always been the largest price point, especially in this case, it was an Ultra, and then, of course, that 2-pack, which had an Optimus in there prior to that, the Bat one we just talked about. But
yeah, and I went out of my way to push for that weird name, Optimus Minor.
Which stuck around because they used it in other areas, minor part and stuff like that. That character, and this is going to also go into Scarem too. I wonder if this is an Aaron Archer thing. That character had extra arms. It had a very weird design to it, where it had multiple. The arms were able to split. The kind of had multiple arms. It had crazy articulation. That figure.
Yeah.
Was that something that you implicated into it, or was that more of a Takara thing on their side?
Yeah, I think at Takara. I don't really recall. And there were a few of us here and there, drawing over top of each other's work. So I don't totally recall.
I find, because also the next one afterwards, the next basic Scarem that you worked on, the Beetle, has the same thing where it's able to make multiple limbs. And it's just me going that's funny. It's both Aaron's designs, and they both have that. Just like how you like the antlers, that's kind of your thing. Yeah. I was wondering, did you have a multiple arm phase,
I don't think so. I have the original sketch of that Beetle somewhere. I'll have to track that down.
And the Scarem, what was the... Might as well, since we're on him now, what was the thought process with that one?
I think the Mummy was around.
The Brendan Fraser movie?
Yeah, and they had those beetles
okay.
In that movie, and I think that was just in the flow, so we just did kind of like a clockwork version.
Okay, cool. Now we're going to get into...
Takara was always going to go for beetles, so...
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that's true. They love their kabutos and stag beetles. And, they love that stuff. So we're getting to the more named characters now. So Deluxe Class Transmetal 2 Dinobot. This one came in both. This one had a variant. It had both the bone white version and a more tanned version that was a running change later on. What was the process with this one? Because this is a pre-existing character now, and you have to have some kind of connection there with the tissue of what came before.
Yeah, I designed both this one and Cheetor kind of under the same lack of knowledge. So I wasn't really watching what they were doing with Mainframe particularly, to be that in depth with how the characters were working. So I did the designs largely based off the visuals alone and really just pushing everything. So if it's a cat, it's going to get bigger claws. If it's a T-Rex or the Velociraptor, it's going to get bigger teeth. With then that overlay of inside-outside tech versus dino skin, kind of Transmetals 2. It's not in or out. It's all over, right? So I think it was just trying to make everything more extreme. All the claws on that thing. It has the tail feature on the Dinobot.
Yeah, it has a toyetic tail. It's something more from your Kenner side, if anything.
Yep.
Having the tail whip feature.
What I can definitely say about the drawings, which I did not understand at the time and grew into this understanding, and kind of fortunate that I had this small, close call with Transformers at this time, because I could kind of see what would happen. And what I mean by that is I drew Cheetor and Dinobot in animal mode, beast mode, and in robot mode. What I didn't entirely expect Takara to do was to try to follow both of those images, because they did a very faithful job of giving me what I gave them, but in that process, I think it makes for a weaker transformer or transformation. Mm-hmm. So what I learned from that was I would focus on one vision over another, because if you give them two images, they're going to try to figure out how to give you both of that, and it's just going to make for potentially not a good puzzle play. So we started doing things like letting them guide some of that second mode, and then we'll put the layering detail over top of that.
And when you say the second mode, so you would do the robot mode first, and that would be the focus.
Yeah, sometimes. Or we do a car and then maybe a head, and then as they figured out the robot, we'd go in and detail the chest out, or detail the knees and legs or something. Because if you give all that information up front, Takara is rightfully taking that on as, oh, this is what they want. And it's going to make their job harder, is basically. And it doesn't make the product that much better. If I don't know exactly how that's going to transform, which I didn't on these items, you can make for some tricky execution, I guess, is what I'm trying to get out here. So I don't think those are the funnest Transformers. You might like the modes, one mode over the other mode, but that's what I got out of those anyway.
The transformations were not as intuitive. I will, especially as someone who was actively collecting that brand as it was coming out at the time, the Transmetal 2 Cheetor did have a kind of a hollowness to us, I guess. And I guess it makes sense where Takara probably had to look at it and go, how do we make it go from one thing to the other? And sometimes the simplest route is the easiest route, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the Cheetor here. So the storage of the gun on the back and stuff, was that your idea? Was that something they came up with? Because that kind of became a very defining element of this design for Cheetor.
I think I got to look at the image. I think I drew something like that, a cannon or something coming out the haunches there. Yeah. Or out the shoulders.
Because it's like it ended up becoming like a rocket for him in the show. So it's like, sometimes stuff that's designed on the toy, the animators, they then run with it and figure out a way to make it practical in the show, because he's a cheetah. So how does he move fast now? So he has a rocket on his back. Makes him move very quickly. I also wanted to ask, so, with Transmetal 2s, we also had the little spark, I guess, orb or whatever, spark chambers that were put on a lot of these characters. Was that something you also had to subconsciously work in when you were designing these, like where that's going to go on these designs? Yeah,
so I can speak to the dragon. I know it was on Tigerhawk as well, but I don't remember how that one went down. I'll tell a little story. So the toy design team, and I believe Takara, wanted to add these little spark drivers.
Okay.
Just as a point of difference, in the show in the Beast Wars show, your spark was a big deal, right? That was kind of your digital soul, and that's what came out of Beast Wars, right? And I think the design team wanted to represent that. And there were a lot of little concepts at that time of little guys in seats and things that they had shown around. And on the development team, it caught on, and I was asked then to do the designs for the Spark drivers that would have gone into these little bubble seats, right? Mm-hmm. They sculpted them up. I remember having an example of the Maximal one, which I wish I still had. And then the guy internally who was kind of responsible for IP development at that time came in and was very much against Spark drivers, very much thinking that takes away from the core personality of the robot, and it's an extra layer that doesn't really need to be communicated or makes any sense to the story that they were ongoing telling. So I can't argue with him on that front that he made the right call there. But as fun toys go, it would have been always cool to have little people back in them, I guess.
I guess the logic was you're looking at Transformers now as a piloted robot, which
exactly. You
goes against the sentient robot thing that they've been selling for up to that point, 10 years.
Yeah. So again, like I said, I don't disagree with what it would have. I agree with that guy not wanting it to go forward, but it was a cool little toy feature that makes Transformers different from Diaclone, right?
Well, it almost has a little bit of that Diaclone DNA by having that.
Well, exactly.
I mean, those cockpits were present on a lot of those early 84, 85 G1 product. It's just there was no drivers included. So
yeah,
and it's kind of funny. Years later, you end up having the same thing. You have these little cockpits with no drivers included.
Yeah. So I definitely think that was early days of Hasbro IP management superseding, whatever the toy people wanted to do. You know what I mean? Kind of really starting to, that group came into play and really started being the main contact with Mainframe and driving what became Beast Machines, certainly, in a bigger way than we would have been doing at this point, even.
Just to kind of close off with Cheetor, just for a fun fact for people, the final design of the Cheetor toy itself was actually somewhat different than what Mainframe did later on with the animation model. The left arm of Cheetor, his upper arm, is kind of like a purple kind of color that they went with. When Mainframe took that, for some reason, they flipped it around. They made it backwards and stuff. So if you actually compare them side by side, Cheetor has like a purple arm. Just a fun whittle fact there. We'll go into the TM2 Megatron Dragon here, one that you really like. So this was an Ultra Class. There's a lot of weird stuff with it. So one thing that I want to ask about, he has like a kind of like an undocumented third mode here where he has like a wheeled, like rolling mode.
Yep.
Where did that come from?
I think that's all Takara.
Okay.
Yeah, that, again, anything I drew was kind of just a big dragon head kind of with wings and then some...
Well, so let's go into your process with that. So did you start with the robot mode? Did you start with the dragon mode?
I think I was doing the dragon mode because the original ask that was given to me was, we've done beasts, we've done transmetals with metal on the outside, fur on the inside. What would it look like to have a mishmash, And so my original charter kind of was to figure out, how do I make a techno-organic thing that is different than what's come before. So I probably started with the beasts over, and that goes with how I usually would work with the alt mode over the robot. Because without the planning of the alt mode, you really don't know what kind of robot you're going to be able to pull out of it. So
yeah, all the kibble and everything.
Yeah, and since they were really looking for me for style, I wasn't responsible in my images for much in the way of features. So like I definitely wouldn't have worried about some sort of transportation mode, with wheels and whatnot. That seems like a very Takara, we can kind of get a third mode out of this, like they did with RID Megatron, some of those modes.
Yeah.
If you move some stuff around, maybe we have a different mode. They kind of like that at times.
And there's different kinds of aesthetic dragon choices. How'd you fall on that one essentially? Because there's more European style dragons, Asian style dragons. Like
I was. We had already done, I believe, Dragonheart product internally.
Oh, with Draco, I think his name was.
Yeah, all that stuff. The Sean Connery dragon and some of those. And so I was purposely pushing away from that stuff, which is more European dragons, and going more skinny Asian serpent, esque dragons with hair and antlers instead of horns and spikes. So I was also looking at a lot more Asian artists and reference back then for my Batman work. Again, we were doing wildly different visions of characters and stuff, so your reference couldn't be what you could get on the store shelves at the local comic book store, because everybody, that wasn't going to change the game at all. So I was looking at Amano and
Masamune Shirow.
Yeah, yep, him. This other guy, sorry, I have this in front of me.
He's going to his art bookshelf right now.
I sure am. Now, the problem is any of this in English is going to help me. Probably not. But there's this one book that I have that I'll give you a picture of that I just would go back and over, use. Yeah, everything's in Japanese, unfortunately. It's a name you'd know. I just don't know it.
You show it to me, I'll have it up on the screen, translated.
Yeah, darn. Sorry. But, I was definitely being more pushed by all that kind of reference and materials into... And it was Takara as well, so I kind of wanted to go in that direction. And by no means is it a Japanese or a true Asian dragon, but it's certainly influenced in that direction.
Well, number one, you have the body of a more Asian-style dragon, but you still had wings on it. Because most Asian dragons don't have wings. So, but you kind of had a fusion of the two, if anything, still keeping that element. Not to mention, you said you came from Batman. How do you not have wings or?
Yeah.
That's always baked inside you that you can't get rid of. Choice of colors, I guess that was probably the Takara side to go with that more pearlescent kind of red,
Yeah, we're gonna. Well, George, the designer, was definitely into metallics and pearlescence, and like the wings on that being kind of molded in clear with the purple oversprays, and then the VM and everything. That is George Bosnos's hallmarks all over the place. He was really into pushing material processes, and he did all the Dragonheart toys as well with all those pearlescents. And these are the little things that you don't always know about designers. Each of us kind of have different skill sets, obviously, and like to push different things. I pushed a few material processes in my day, but I also got really interested in trademark and copyright law, right? As an adjunct to my toy design internal development of this brand's knowledge, whereas other guys would fall down the manufacturing rabbit hole and really want to learn how to make the best gold you could make, or the best metallic you could make, or try different things. And all of us kind of found different ways to excel, and that's how George really excelled. He brought in the material processes and that type of thing.
Now, also, segue excelling something here, we're going to talk about the largest price point of the Beast Wars line, which was the super class price point, and something that you were involved with, and that was the creation of Optimal Optimus. This was a figure that brought something to Beast Wars that was absent, which was electronics, and touted itself as the Air Guardian of Transformers, which was a title not used since 1985's Jetfire. So Optimal Optimus, what could you tell us about this iconic piece of Transformers history, let alone Beast Wars?
So this is a funny story. So this is definitely in a transitional period where management started becoming more prescriptive about single items at times, and or price points that might be missing or opportunistically asked for by a retailer. So I don't know the full pedigree, but what I do know is this type of item was asked for, whether by a retailer or a management. A higher priced with electronics, a little more Kennerized toy than just a traditional puzzle transformer. And I think it got added in. And I remember the team that was working on those products, which would have been George Bosnos and the engineer Jerry Palmer. They didn't want to make time for it. I think they didn't want to do it. They didn't see the value in it. And they, from their seats, thought that they could stall the request out and not deal with it. Because the Takara deal was very tight back then. It was very opaque about communication and things. So if those guys didn't want to work on it, it didn't get worked on, and that's very strange. And this was, like I said, transitional, where the company was going, "Hey, we need what we need. We're going to get what we need. You guys don't get to like sit on the line plan anymore like you used to."
So what you're trying to say is if they would have somehow found a way to ignore it, that could have just been a product that never happened?
Yeah, it was going to be a product that didn't happen.
Wow, okay.
Which is how I and two co-ops got pulled into the conference room and said, "We got 2 days to come up with this item. This is what we need out of it. Jerry and George don't want to have anything to do with it, so you don't need to talk to them about it. You don't need to ask them anything about it. Come up with an Optimus that, has a couple modes, has this electronics idea. If it can fire a projectile or have lights, that's cool." Very, very toyetic kind of brief. But it was definitely a different type of Transformers brief. So for us working on the Batman stuff, it was like, oh yeah, we can do this. For the Transformer guys that wanted to keep their cards very close to the vest and not really do products that they had to work harder on, if you catch my drift, they didn't want to do it. So me, as kind of a inspirational kind of leader that, let's try some stuff to kick this thing off. A guy that I had brought in, I think might have been new or it might have been a co-op, named Ben Hitmar. He has designed a lot of great stuff, and now he's at Mattel. And another great guy that worked in games for years, Dan Sanfilippo. He was the co-op. He even lived in my house for a little while. So good old friend. The three of us basically were in this conference room for a day and a half, drawing a bunch of things and coming up with what became the board that got presented and then ultimately made to become Optimal Optimus. So that item is made by no one that had previously worked on Transformers without any Takara input.
Which might say a lot about, I guess, like how it transforms and how or lack of it's very rudimentary. I don't know how to describe it. It's like,
it's a different type of
car
item.
mode. Yeah, car mode is what it is. Jet mode is what it is. Gorilla mode is what it is.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
think
it's trying to make the best with what they got.
I think we were more impressed with the big light up cannons, the big
that was
the
cool.
big chrome flying off panels on the forearms. That kind of feature.
Well, let's kind of break that down. So let's start first with having that feature with the blast off, I guess, blast panels or whatever. So where did that come from? Was that just
that was very much
element?
Yeah, very much in that classic Batman spring loaded type of knowledge. Okay, let's have something blow off.
And
Easy.
Having the clear, because again, first time using electronics in Beast Wars, having that you pull a plunger on the back for the missiles, but it also lights up the eyes and lights up, smart use of translucent plastic for both the missiles and the chest in certain areas to then light up the missiles. What was the thinking behind that? They just wanted to have something that was light up. Is that a retailer kind of request? Or
Yeah. Big, obvious, demonstrable features for a commercial. Probably.
Cool. Well, especially the way it was packaged too.
Yep.
They packaged it in a way that, like you've said in the past, like sometimes Walmart is how you guys determine the scale of boxes and stuff like that. And it's something where it's like, here's this item that is in its box is very large.
Well, it's one of those things with Transformers. It was like the guys that had been designing it, they kept adding complexity to the item so that it would get more expensive, but it wouldn't get bigger. And this was at a time where Hasbro needed a higher priced item. So if you think about the Cheetor that came out later, in Beast Machines, and then like Optimal
the
Optimus.
Supreme Cheetor.
Yeah.
Cheetor.
Like Transformers suffered. I know the fans are going to be screaming like, "Hey, we got Metroplex. We got, we got all these other big guys." Well, it's not always a matter of bigger. It needs to be a bigger selling point, with clear launchers and light up features and blow off panels or all that kind of thing.
Also a different time of toys too.
Yeah.
Things change.
So that was
what
probably
is
the
demanded
problem
from the audience.
Yeah, it was an issue with Transformers is that it didn't have these kind of bigger price points. And then I even dealt with it with like the role play aspect of Transformers having an issue. And Transformers doesn't follow all the rules of toy brands. And sometimes that's really good, and other times it's a struggle to try to figure that out. So this was a way to get a big item that did stuff that would look great in a commercial.
The next level, Transmetals. New electronic Optimal Optimus, the biggest Transmetal ever. Blazing beast mode to tank assault to air attack to plasma cannon robot. 4 modes of disguise, 1 massive size. Beast Wars Transmetals.
It wasn't about finicky transformation play. It wasn't about, a perfect animal execution. It was just about these big play features and sound effects.
And the decision to make it like a 4-changer, like the decision to make it have a jet mode, we'll call it a rolling car mode or whatever, vehicular mode, and having the gorilla, that was something that was decided by you guys, or were you guided like, we want it to be 4 things, we want it to have a flight and a ground, alt mode also? Like, where did those decisions come?
I think it was a combo. I think that we were asked to look to some of that, and then that's how it got executed.
Because there's obviously, especially when you're developing this, the show is on television, and it's a given that at some point the storytelling elements that you're putting into these are going to be used. You put a jet mode on this Optimal Optimus toy or a car mode, at some point it's going to be used in the show. A character that traditionally up to that point has always had some kind of flight mode. So,
yeah,
it's something where it's interesting to see like the process of, how you decide, okay, it's got to have that. And also too, it has a cockpit that opens up. And was this something that was also during that early Spark Drivers thing, or that was just a coincidence that it also has an opening cockpit that you could put a figure in if you wanted to?
Yeah, I think that was a coincidence. It might have been at a similar timing, but I don't think so. I don't remember a Spark Driver ever being in an image and stuff for that one.
Yeah. Okay.
It was just those little details to try to make these elements to be fair, because they're not. It's not a great plane. It's not a great vehicle. It's not. But if it has a cockpit and wings and it kind of, you could squint your eyes and make the claim.
Yeah, if it looks like the front of a plane, and then you put some wings on the side, you're halfway there.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, it is a very odd item. It's a very Kenner-esque type of item. And definitely when you compare it to, like, let's say a Tiger Hawk at the similar timing, yeah, you can tell they're made with different goals in mind, for sure. And transformation on Optimal Optimus was not the priority.
No, it's a very easy transformation. When we're talking like the choices of colors and stuff, because also, again, you look at how this character looked in the past and how there's very radical changes in his choice of coloring and stuff. Who came up with that for the choice of like very vibrant colors for this one?
Yeah, I don't recall on that one. Again, I wasn't going to be responsible for the end product, so I didn't see that through. I had more to do with the red, white, and blue one at one point.
Okay, the Primal Prime later with Beast Machines.
Yeah, I think I had a little more to do with that one, just
shepherding
it through. I think those colors were already chosen.
And what I was about to say, it's pretty clear what you guys were trying to do, but what were you trying to do? Might as well hear it, like with the.
Yeah, look, clearly this is at the time where, Beast Machines probably wasn't doing what it needed to do, and they were desperate to get back to any basics, and it's like, let's put the Optimus colors back on that guy quick.
That's what I think.
And try to start that heartstring pull even before RID and before Armada could come out. That's my sometimes there's tactics that totally make sense in the room, and like I just said, I think that makes sense. But in the execution in the big world, will it ever latch on the way you intend it? Probably not. They're just better colors than brown and orange.
It's also something where when you look at it, and timing is everything, like you said, we're at that era where we're at the transition from, Beast Wars and to a lighter extent Beast Machines being this radical change to Transformers. And then we're going to be leaving Beast Machines, and Primal Prime was a late Beast Machines product.
Yeah,
we're leaving Beast Machines, going into Nostalgiaville. We're going into Robots in Disguise, return to vehicles, return of classic trademarks.
Like I say, trying to get back to basics. So if that was a way we can veneer one of these old guys back in the basics, classic red and blue-esque colors, then let's make that decision over new colors.
Well, it's also, when you really think about it, it was, because you had Bat Optimus Primal, Gorilla Optimus Primal, another Gorilla Optimus Primal with a transmetal element, and then you got this one here. Here's an Optimus that has a vehicle aspect to it. It had some kind of truck, if you will, car. So, putting the traditional red, white, and blue Optimus colors on it, you could kind of, if you squint, you see a blurry image of it. Oh, maybe it's Optimus Prime.
And then I think, when you take this item, I think that informed what became the Optimus Primal from Beast Machines, trying to create a big electronic item. He's also
the Air Attack Optimus Primal later.
Yeah. He kind of falls under some of the same rules while being a better Optimus. I'll give him that for sure.
So that's pretty cool. Anything else you want to say about this tail end experience with Transformers, Beast Wars before? Because then obviously you didn't have much experience with Beast Machines. That wasn't really a brand you were working with at the time, right?
Yeah, not too much. I dealt with bringing in some of those items that were developed for Beast Machines into what would have been RID. So the Battle Unicorn, the Megatron head, who was the other one?
The Cerberus.
The Cerberus. Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
Cerberus. The Cerberus was
Bruticus.
the one that was the most weird because it was an item that probably shouldn't have got kicked off, right? And so it was halfway in development, and then Beast Machines was failing, so they didn't know what they wanted to do with it. But the model was made, and the deal with Hasbro and Takara is once you get to a certain point, you really want to make the item, otherwise you're going to end up eating
Just
the
wasting
entire
time and
development
material.
cost and all that time. So that's how that item was the one that was the trickiest Beast Machines transition for me, because it was the most furthest along that was going to be executed with the least amount of back end work having been done. So there was no deco sheet, no mold plan, that kind of thing. No name, no backstory.
Still to this day.
Yeah, I made a Megatron's jailer. That was pretty basic.
Yeah. So you finish your work with Beast Wars. You said you were you were working on multiple things at the same time. What other brands were you, like, you leave Beast Wars, where would you go into after that?
Yeah, it would have been Batman stuff, and then soon after it would have been transition to episode 1.
Okay, cool. Just want to.
Yeah, so
it's true. Yeah, would have
so
been
the Batman
99,
Transformers
right.
team was one big team, even though those two brands are very different. Different people did different stuff. We had our team meetings together, our group lunches together, all that kind of stuff. So I was in the mix, and you'll hear me tell these stories of being in the office next door when this happened or this came in. And this was the same time I met Yoke-san. Around the same time doing these sketches, because I think I needed to get their approval. Maybe George wanted them to feel comfortable with me, as I was going to be sending these images over, or my images would be getting sent over. I didn't send them at the time, so that was the first time I met Yoke-san at the time too.
So your first beginning of your relationship, this long illustrious relationship with Takara, really started with Beast Wars. Would you say?
Yeah. I remember Yoke coming into my office and going through some of my sketchbooks at the time, and George pumping me up, saying he's going to be doing some concepts and whatnot, and having a polite nodding of the heads and shaking of the hands with some Japanese gentlemen, and feeling like that was pretty cool. But that was literally the extent of it at the time.
He's looking right at Yoke-san. This guy's going to work on Jar Jar Binks. He's going to be the next big thing. Yeah,
a little bit.
Yoke-san's like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, what else I wanted to ask? I just totally lost it there. So what did you pretty much take away from working on at least Beast Wars? Because we all take away a little something, even if you're just in there for a brief moment. What did you? Because obviously, by you doing Beast Wars and having that first connection with Transformers, what would come later on with you and that brand as a whole. But what did you take away, at least from working with Beast Wars just for a little bit and doing Transformers?
Yeah, well, one, I knew it was really cool to develop all this stuff internally, and that ultimately gets turned into cartoons and other things. So that was always very attractive to me. That's probably why I got into toys. I liked G.I. Joe, I liked Transformers. Like, the making up of the stories and stuff was more fun. So sitting next to the Beast Wars teams is what I got out of Beast Wars at the time. Watching how a whole different side of the company develops product, a whole different relationship with that product development, having a show that was being developed at that level, the 3D show at the time, kind of just sitting in some of the brainstorms and different things. It gave me extra access to knowledge that I wasn't going to get the same way on Batman. And I think that development process started there, that I knew once a chance would come up, I'd like to do more of that. And so it probably started the hunger. And then going from there to Star Wars, where all that's blocked off, all that's predetermined, all of it's executional, it really gave my hunger to go, oh man, I want to get back to that other stuff that was happening on things like Transformers.
What he means by that exactly is when you go into something like Star Wars, you're just pretty much being fed the actors and just replicate that. There's no creativity.
The creativity is in how you execute the price points and how you present the products. But yeah, nobody wants you to come up with a different color for Luke's lightsaber. That's not necessary or helpful. So it's just different kind of product development. Whereas if you're on a Transformers or maybe even a G.I. Joe, let's call it a Sigma 6, where you're kind of developing new visions of classic characters, that's a different level of design and kind of input that some people really love, like me, and other guys do not. If they just want to make great fire spring-loaded projectile type models, and like again, I started this off. Everybody comes at their roles a little different and brings something special to it.
What would you say? Because here you're coming off of Kenner 5-point of articulation Batman stuff, and then like you said, you're leaving Beast Wars, going back into, well, it wasn't 5-point of articulation, but almost kind of that same vein with the episode 1 stuff. What would you say was different in between those two? Let's say working on Transformer stuff, like especially a lot more parts, a lot more pieces. What was the difference between the two?
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot more opportunity for unique mold plans and then colors through that mold plan. The action figure stuff is very limited. It's a lot of paint, and Transformers, since they transform, you got to worry about paint rub and scratching a little bit differently, obviously, so that doesn't happen. Whereas an action figure, you don't even have to consider that stuff because it's not going to happen, unless it's right on the seam of an arm or something. So it's just, it gave me a wider view. At the time, I needed a bit of a wider view so that when I got back to Transformers, I had a bit of a concept of a wider view. I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but
no, that's totally is. That totally is. The last thing I want to ask is, so of the characters that you did, was of the Beast Wars crew, and obviously you might not have been aware of what characters were available at the time, but was there anyone you would have liked to do as a figure when you were there working with Beast Wars? Like if you would have liked an opportunity to do this character, that character, or even a design, you would have liked to do a Scorpion or something like that.
I don't recall. I can't quite remember if I was given the list of animals and bugs and things, or I came up with those on my own.
Okay.
So
is there something that if you could have, would you have looking back now, I would have really liked to do a polar bear or this or that,
No, I probably would have liked to have done an armored knight Rhinox.
Oh, okay. Which is kind of funny. That's we're kind of getting something like that now.
Yeah. To that point, what I've seen from the new film, I do like the Rhinox. And that's what's triggering me to go, maybe I was given a list with Dinobot and Cheetor, and then we need a couple other things in the basic price point. Come up with those.
Well, that's pretty awesome.
And then the dragon, I recall the dragon being just, if he's a T-Rex already, he's a giant lizard with teeth. What's the most extreme version of a giant lizard-ish thing with teeth would be a dragon.
It's like the next evolution.
Yeah, and I think that's how that happened.
Well, and when you even look at it, he starts as a crocodile, which is also kind of an old lizard creature, and then he's a T-Rex, and then he's a flying T-Rex with metal on him. Now he's a dragon. Where do you go from there? It's like
big spider head, apparently.
A big floating head in the sky with spider legs, I guess.
But if the design people are doing any kind of decent job, that thread should be there. So you point that out. It's nice that it is there.
Yeah. So that's it more or less that we're going to cover with the Beast Wars Transmetal 2 stuff that Aaron worked on. We're going to cover more Beast Wars stuff in the future. We're talking with different individuals that worked on the brand all those years ago, and we're going to try to get them here on the podcast in some shape or form and talk about those stories, because Beast Wars is a beloved part of the Transformers brand. In my opinion, I will always feel it's what saved the brand in a lot of ways. And it's just interesting that even for someone like you, it's like who would go on to do so many important things with Transformers, from the Unicron trilogy and really rebooting the brand there, and then the live action movie stuff, which really put Transformers back on the big stage. And yet it's funny how you even had a small part with one of the first real big reboots of Transformers and getting it back on the main stage with Beast Wars. So we just wanted to kind of just cover that story. Anything else you want to say before we close this one up?
I'd just like to point this out from time to time. At the time that Beast Wars came out, if you look at the packaging and the logo, it's Beast Wars Transformers. And Transformers is less than a quarter the scale of the Beast Wars graphic.
Branding, yeah.
It tells you how the brand was desperate to turn the page and try to regain its glory, which it did. But it's not a Transformers Beast Wars segment. It is a Beast Wars Transformers segment. That's how much they were trying to get to a new spot, it seems. So I just like pointing that out. We think now Transformers is evergreen and it's the most popular brand name and it's there. How could that ever be displaced? But it wasn't so long ago that it wasn't the priority. And that's a toy aisle reason. Totally a toy aisle reason, by the way.
Would you say, and this is like one of the last questions we'll have, is do you think that Hasbro having Transformers as Hasbro for that entire run up until late 95 G2 and then moving it to Kenner was their opinion of the brand at the time by moving it to Kenner? Like, by giving it to Kenner instead, what does that say from your perspective?
Well, to me, Kenner was a repository of the more active Boys Toys brands. So they just wanted to house them all together, And so that's really what it was. The excellence of what Kenner brought to the party was a different type of play feature than what Hasbro's Boys Action had, which was G.I. Joe and Cops and pretty much action figures, not the total mech tech package that Kenner brought. So really, Transformers just got put over with the other boys' products, and Tonka and some girls' products got moved to Rhode Island, where that center of excellence was.
So Kenner of that era, when you think like Star Wars, all the Batman stuff that was going on
Jurassic
at the time that was
Park,
selling gangbusters, Jurassic Park, yeah.
XRC,
so,
you could consider some of that. Vortec was happening.
So that was kind of like the big place where Boys Toys were, where Hasbro was doing more, like you said,
they were doing the Play-Doh, they were doing Tonka.
Play-Doh, it's true, yeah.
And girls' products. That's where My Little Pony.
My Little Pony, yeah.
Littlest Pet Shop.
Littlest Pet
came
Shop,
back to prominence. And then the dolls and the for real pets kind of things. That's what was happening when we arrived in Rhode Island.
Yeah, that makes sense now. Because now today we all envision under one roof, and we just kind of all associate it together.
Yeah, Cincinnati became the Boys Toys kind of action feature center.
So that's why Transformers was brought there
to
get back into business. So that's it, more or less. Again, that's our little Beast Wars segment. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something today, and I hope you guys go to see Transformers Rise of the Beast in theaters. We're not sponsored, we're just saying. Brought July 8th for early screenings and July 9th for the rest of the globe. And thank you again, Aaron, for being there.
No problem. A lot of fun.
Yeah, it's always good to talk about the robots in the skies, and we'll talk again real soon here on the Toy Armada with Aaron Archer. Be sure to send in your questions. Check out the live streams on Friday nights when you can, and we'll see you in the near future.